Welcome to the Heroic Minds podcast, where we uncover the heroic stories of individuals battling through adversity and rising to the top of professional sport, business, and life, uncovering the characteristics, the secrets, the tactics to become the hero of your own story, because it is adversity that maximizes human potential. To the Heroic Minds podcast. On today's episode, we have Audrey Kouyoumdjian, who has an interesting story, to say the least. But before we get into that, something that I'm learning actually presently in my own life even is, I'm going to try and simplify this as much as I can. I find the trend of mindfulness, the trend of meditation, the trend of gratitude journals. Yes, these things are great, and in the past I've recommended them, and I'm not saying I don't. But going off of that, I'm realizing, or I'm making an estimation, that are these things needed now today, or such a big hit today, because of avoidance? Do we avoid certain conversations because they make us uncomfortable? Because the outcome may require pain. The outcome may require awkwardness. The outcome may require a future of a little bit of work to get through what is going to come of that conversation. And you can think, you could put this anyway. It could be a relationship, could be work, could be any situation. And are we at a time where, again, this is an estimation, I'm thinking out loud, where say we avoid certain topics because we know what the outcome might be, so we don't want to have that conversation. We know the outcome might require a lot of work, so I'll just stay in my lane, I'll avoid the issue, won't talk about it. But now I'm feeling a little bit anxious. Now I'm starting to forget the things that make me happy. Okay, so I need to start meditating then. I need to start writing in my gratitude journal so I can feel happy again. So just, I don't know, you could reflect and think, are there issues that I'm not dealing with that are the reason for my gratitude journal, for my meditation? And I'm not saying you have to get those out of your life. I'm saying, would you have less reliance on those things, such as meditating or your gratitude journal, if you stopped avoiding those things that you don't want to talk about, those things that you don't want to admit to yourself or maybe to others? And if you dealt with that, you may find, after you get through the situation from approaching the topic, maybe you don't need that gratitude journal as much. Maybe you don't need to meditate as much because you're replacing that by approaching those difficult conversations. You're replacing the need for relaxation therapies with having tough conversations, dealing with the things that are bothering you. So going off of that, sorry for that little blurb, but it relates strongly to this conversation today. So one thing is, I don't know anything about being a lesbian. I don't know anything about multiple sclerosis. I don't know anything about the generation really that the guest grew up in, but I'm approaching that conversation. Is it awkward? Yes. Is it maybe more awkward for Audrey to tell that story and reflect on that? Yeah, probably. But I want to get across that initial point of having those conversations that maybe we don't want to. Scared about the outcome, scared about the reaction, whatever it is. And so that's really relates strongly to Audrey's story in this episode today. She spent 20 years in a relationship with a man while she was in love with another woman. And it wasn't until she approached that conversation, she had that conversation, made the changes that came of it. It took about there's probably still some pains that exist, but it took 3 years for her and her family and the people that she knew were involved with her life to accept this new change. But it all started with that conversation that she had been avoiding. And she explains how that closely tied to her health and how that negatively affected her health. But again, once she had that conversation, the need for those other things to help her, the life coach, the mental health, the focus on her mental health, that all subsided because she had that conversation that she didn't want to have. And I sat across from her. I'm editing this now, but when I was sitting across from her, I see this healthy woman sitting across from me that has MS. You may think, oh, she's probably, struggling or whatever your assumption is. No, she walked in and met me with no issue. And again, as a young person. But it wouldn't be that way, I don't think, if she didn't have this conversation, if she didn't approach something that was difficult, very difficult to approach. And so it's just a little bit of the message today. I think they're not all going to be as big as this situation as we're about to talk about here, but maybe it's something little, and maybe that something little turns into something bigger. And maybe that something bigger now starts to affect your life, affect your happiness. And then you reach for those things to help you cope. But let's deal with it before we need those things to cope. Alrighty, so Audrey Kouyoumdjian, 20 years in a relationship with a man, in love with another woman, diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, told never to have kids, never to open a physio therapy clinic, does both of them. We talk about it openly. It is quite the journey. And at the end, she's happy, she's healthy. There are a bunch of little messages in this episode and a couple quotes that I pulled out of her book that I shared. I also have the link to her book attached to the description of this episode if you wanted to check it out. She's an incredible person that has been through a lot. And it just shows you that life can throw some pretty crazy situations and ideas your way. Before we get going, check out truelocal.ca. My freezer is full of True Local individually packaged meats right now. I have not gone back to regular meat from the grocery store since starting my True Local subscription. So check them out. And if you are interested in giving them a test run, there's no obligations at all. You can try them for a month and then cancel. But I don't think you'll be canceling the subscription. It's pretty awesome. So check them out, truelocal.ca, high quality meat, individually packaged, shipped right to your doorstep. They actually, one of my favorite new products now is chicken breast that comes already seasoned. And it's incredible. You just thaw it out, throw it in the oven or on the barbecue, and voila. You're a professional chef. All right, so check them out and use my discount code HeroicMinds25, all capital letters, to get $25 off a regular size box and $10 off an individual size box. That individual size box discount is strictly for Heroic Minds listeners only, and I'm not even allowed to tweet it out because it's just for those that listen. So $10 off an individual size box if you want to give it a test run. All right, here we go.
And so when I was growing up, moving from city to city, every 2 to 3 years we were moving. And I think those changes are what built my personality. I think the new friends, saying hello to new friends, saying goodbye to new friends, really built a lot of my character, because I think that I really tried hard to build relationships. When I was 5 and 6, I didn't know the importance of building relationships other than the feel good. So if I had a new friendship, I felt good. And if I was invited to the lunch table, I felt good. And if I saw that my friends were behind me and rooting for me and asking me to be on their team, I felt good. And so I really think through my life, I follow how I feel. And if it feels good, I stay there and I build it. I remember actually when I was really little, I was living in Philadelphia and I was in an apartment building, and the doorman's name was Stanley. And I would stand with Stanley and chat with Stanley. And I'm sure he was an old man to me. I'm sure probably looking back, he was probably 28. And I remember saying, I want to help you. And people would come into the apartment building with their bags. We're talking about 1964. And I was little. And I would help them take their bags up to their apartment. And they would say, oh, great. And sometimes they would invite me in for a cookie. And I know that every time that I would do things for people and I would give to the people, they would be so excited and happy, and it fed me. And so I see that I'm fed through love. Okay. And if you love me, I will pour my heart into you. And I think that's kind of what created my life, where I know what my purpose is in my life. I know that my purpose here is to give. That's why I'm a physiotherapist and I'm a caregiver. I take care of you. And I don't just, it's a saying that we have now, I have now, I don't treat shoulders, I treat people. And if your shoulder is going to help you hold your grandchild, I want that shoulder better. And so I want to make sure that I'll do everything. Right. So I think it just, for me in my life, it's a feel good. And if it feels good, I continue it. Right. And then in times when it doesn't feel so good, I turn away.
Yeah, that's what I found interesting going through your book was the word love came up a lot, and it was interesting because I sensed from reading it was just general, like exactly like you're saying, that you had a love for people that was just that's like again you're it's hard to put words into it because you basically just said it better than I could say it. But I noticed that your relationships of love weren't, when we think of love, we think of intimate with one other, but it felt like you had this genuine love for people, and that's what your relationships were built on, exactly like you're saying, which I think is so cool and a different approach to the word. And I wonder if we're at a time where we're getting away from that in society. I'm not sure, but I just think it's an interesting approach and something different than we hear today. We assume that, love is a dangerous thing.
And I think you're absolutely right that we're getting away from it, but there is a core group who really feel it, who are trying so hard desperately to pull society back in. Mm-hmm. What is the common theme today? Love is love. Mm-hmm. Love is love, whether it's different people loving each other, whether it's we're now loving our pets, we're bringing our pets into the family, we're loving people from across the world. Cultures are trying to love each other because there's so much unlove, and that we need to be strong in love if we're going to keep this world, our planet together, and our people together. Totally.
I think that's so good. I guess moving into, so you built this amazing set of characteristics and personality. I mean, it's obvious in reading the book. You talk about how you strive to sell the most hot cross buns in school, and how you stayed out of the way of the drugs and all the other bad things that can go on, obviously, at a young age. And you were the president of your class in school. So you've built up to be quite the well-rounded individual. In the book, you said you were going to do what makes people happy, and I put people in quotations because it's a lot of assumptions that we have to do things the way everyone else is doing it, and whether they perceive to be happy, okay, we need to do the same thing. So you leave university, you're on a job hunt. From there, where were you relationship-wise, and we'll get into things.
So when I look through my life, I do things to make people happy, but that's also my parents. And I knew that my parents had a life that I really liked. And I always got everything that I wanted, which I was quite happy with. And so I always felt like I had enough. And I remember actually when my mother used to tell me, she was born in Detroit. She was born during the times when there was depression. And I used to say, wow, that must have been really hard. And she said, I said, were you poor? She said, no, we were never poor. We just didn't have money. And so she would sit in a place of, they had to make do. And I feel like through my life, I have looked at myself and I've seen that I always have enough. And when I don't have what I want, I just kind of work on it. But I really did try to do what my parents kind of set out for me. And so I had dreams. And my dreams were, I had 2 lovely sisters. My parents had 3 kids, and I wanted kids. And I love my mom and dad's relationship. And so I wanted to be married with a husband. And I wanted a husband and kids. And I saw that my dad was well educated and my mom was smart. And I wanted to make sure I went to university. So back in the 70s, women going to university was not at all new, but it wasn't as popular. For instance, like today, everybody knows they go to university. Women often would go through high school and then get married and have children and not go to university. But my dad said, no, you got to go to university, and what do you like to do? And my eldest sister was an amputee from cancer, and so I had gone to many appointments with her, and I saw that she had difficulty walking with one leg, and I really enjoyed seeing the challenges that she had and trying hard to go forward. And so I figured I loved medicine. I went to college at the time, and I was in phys ed. I was going to be a gym teacher. I really didn't want to be a gym teacher. I really more wanted to do something else different. So I asked the teachers there what I could do, and they said physical therapy. Ooh, well, that sounded interesting. At the time, I had a wonderful Armenian boyfriend that I loved dearly. I had met him at church, but I got accepted in Toronto. My sister had lived in Toronto, so I got accepted there, and I was quite excited. Went into physical therapy. I got in and had a great time, loved school, and loved doing physical therapy. I had dreams, and my dreams were to go to school, get an education. While I was in school, I broke up with the boyfriend in Boston, and I met another man at church and fell in love with him. And he was a great, great man, and I loved him to bits. Nice Armenian man, handsome, kind, all the things you want in a partner. And so we fell in love, and I got married. And I was delighted to be married now and a physical therapist. Everything was going great, and let's have kids. Now, at the same time when I was in university, I also had a girlfriend roommate. And, we were best buds. And when you're a young girl, girls love their girlfriends. Even women love their women friends. Girls just love girls, no matter who you are. And you can kind of connect. I loved her so much, and we just did everything together, and everybody called us two peas in a pod. And we lived together for 3 years while in school, and she was the smartest in the class, and I just adored her brain, and I loved her brain. We did everything together, and she kind of said, "Aren't we just the bestest friends?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "But we have a special relationship." I said, "Oh, yes, we do." And then I feel like she was like, punching me on the shoulder. "Aren't we great?" And I said, yeah, we're great. And we were just bestest friends. And so I had this bestest friend. I had lots of friends. I had this fabulous man that was my husband. And my girlfriend, we spent a lot of time together, way too much time together, or I loved it so much.
And so at this point, too, are you living now with you're living with your husband?
I'm living with my husband.
Yeah, and then you see this best friend quite often. From the book, it sounds like a lot. Yeah,
a lot.
And so then you decide to have kids, or you're thinking about having kids.
We're thinking about having kids. Right before getting married, we said, "Do we want kids?" Yes.
Okay, and then I guess going on from there, the point where you're diagnosed is around the same time when debating having children, correct?
Well, so what happened was I was married to my husband, and I had my best girlfriend, and I saw her a lot, and we became very close. And while married, we then crossed the lines, and we kissed, and we became intimate. Wow, I got shocked. So I didn't really understand it, and right now I even feel wonderfully awkward about it because I know now I'm in a happy place, but at the time I felt uncomfortable but loved it. So I loved her to her core. I loved being with her, and I loved kissing her, and I loved being intimate with her. And I loved being intimate with him. So don't ask me what that means.
Yeah.
I didn't have a definition for it, and I didn't understand it, but I didn't want to let it go.
I just thought I would add my own 2 cents here. I think it's interesting that, okay, so not only is Audrey not really able to explain that, but even if she did, I don't know if I would really ever understand that situation. And it's just this idea of we avoid topics and we avoid certain, maybe even minorities. If we look on the grand scale of things, we avoid certain minorities or different groups or people or things because we don't understand them. We can listen, we can try our best to understand them, and there's no reason for me to disrespect Audrey for what she believes in or how she feels.
And so I loved her, I loved him, and I knew, though, that loving her intimately was wrong. I knew that according to my church, I was going to go to hell. Right. I knew that it was a sin. I knew that it was wrong. And so I had all kinds of terrible feelings all around me. Mm-hmm. And yet I felt like it was so right. I felt like it felt so good. Mm-hmm. And why would this be so wrong? And why am I there? And why was I experiencing that? Why was I put up to be challenged? Why was I confronted with this new experience? Mm-hmm. Which puzzled me. And rather than be puzzled, my girlfriend and I would have conversations, and she was always so cute because she would always say, "It's just love. And I'd say, well, what's this, homosexuality stuff? We're not homosexuals. And then I didn't even really know the word lesbian. What's this lesbian stuff? We're not lesbians. We just love each other. And so then I would go with her on vacation, and my mom would say, why are you going with her on vacation and not him? And I'd say, well, he doesn't like to ski. Oh, okay, honey. And we'd go skiing. Mm-hmm. And then we'd go to the beach. And my mom would say, why aren't you going with him to the beach? Why her? He doesn't like the beach. Oh, okay, honey. My mother and father were always fine with my relationship with her because we were just best friends, and that's what they saw. They saw best friends going to the beach and going skiing.
Right, and at this point, too, in the book, you had said that, and I don't know if this is at the same time, but you said, I didn't think I was gay. I didn't want to be gay because, again, you also knew with the church, right, that did you think at all that you were, and it was kind of pushing it under the rug that I'm not, to kind of, in your own mind, hide the fact that you had another relationship with a man as well that you were planning to have a family with?
I wish I knew. I wish I could tell you I was that intelligent, and so I wasn't. Mm-hmm. And I knew I wasn't gay, and I knew I wasn't a lesbian. And so I knew for a fact I was straight, but I just didn't know how to put that into feelings and or words.
Right.
And it's not until my book was able to put it into words. So really at the time, I kind of, I just loved her so much, I didn't really want to even talk about it. Right. I didn't want to really put it into words. I knew it was wrong. Just put that on the back burner, as you said.
Yeah. And as you put that on the back burner,
wanted to be safe.
Yeah. While it was on the back burner, I guess where then were things with your husband at that point, and where was life going with him?
Right, so it was great. We had a great time. So instead of going skiing, we went to the museums, and we went on our vacations to Paris and to Italy and had great times. And so we would always do really different things. He was also smart and wonderful. And so I loved my life with him and never thought I wanted anything different. I still we went to church. I loved going to church. And we planned on babies. And then I was kind of feeling ill. And so what I didn't expect in my life was to fall in love with a woman. And then what I didn't expect was to have a relationship with the man, my husband, and a woman. And then what I didn't expect was to have fabulous feelings of love and terrible feelings of guilt and shame and sinning. I hated that. And I started to feel ill. As a matter of fact, what happened was I started to lose my sight. Now, I was a physiotherapist working at a big hospital at the time, and my sight started to deteriorate. It got blurry, and my hearing became fuzzy. And as a matter of fact, I held a telephone to my right ear, and I noticed it was really muffled. And I thought, I must have an ear infection. Held it to my left ear, and it was fine. And I didn't understand it. Well, working at the hospital, I thought I would go and get it researched a little bit. And then in addition to me going to the, medical book stacks and looking through volumes and volumes of information, because after all, I was in medical school and I had learned what was going on with my sight and my hearing. And I went and I was tested, and to make a really short story even shorter, because it didn't take long for them to see that I had MS. And I ended up now in another hospital looking to see that all of my CT scans, etc., pointed the fact I had MS, multiple sclerosis. And I thought, this doesn't even make sense. I'm a physical therapist. I'm treating this. I'm not supposed to have it. How am I going to take care of people if I had this? Mm-hmm. And so I kind of started to look back and say, this is kind of scary now. And I know that I'm feeling guilty, and I know I'm feeling terrible about the relationship, and I know I do love her, but I have to change direction.
Was that what you thought would fix your health at that point? Like having that diagnosis and realizing then, like, as you are right now, reflecting on the stress at that time, did you think that dealing with those relationships, or however you were dealing with it in your mind, would then fix or improve your health?
Again, I don't think I was that smart to think that. And I'm being serious. I think what I thought was, I need to build a life and go in a direction that makes sense. And so I need my husband to have a relationship with him, and we need to grow together in order to build this life. And because I felt like I was veering off a path that didn't make sense to me, I needed to pull myself back onto the path I knew. And so I don't think it was as cognizant as, and I didn't go through that, but I did go through, I'm afraid, this isn't making sense. And I still today have the saying, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense, and look at what makes sense and move forward there. So her relationship didn't make sense. And so I said to myself, I need to go off that relationship and go on to being a physiotherapist, being married, have children, have my house, and go forward like I understood and like I knew, like my parents did. Mm-hmm. So I think it was just an easier place for me to be. So I started to minimize my seeing her, and she still wanted to see me, and she still didn't get it. But I really didn't feel good, and there were other times when my feet started feeling really weird and tingly, and my hands started feeling weird and tingly, and my health was compromised. And the doctor said to me, don't open a physiotherapy clinic and don't have children, which just, oh my gosh. And, in my mind, I thought, I can't believe this. And I actually swore at the doctor.
I saw that in your book.
I don't know, do I want to say it on? And
a select few words.
Yes. And I didn't make sense to me. I am going to start a clinic, and I am going to have kids, because that's the direction I understood. Mm-hmm. And so I really did feel that I wanted to go in that direction.
Right.
So I slowly said, I didn't even say goodbye to her, and I didn't even put a goodbye with her, which was, as I look back, a really sad thing that I did, and I'm sorry for that. Instead, I just escaped.
Okay.
And I escaped from her, and I went to him. And only later did I understand that I should have done it differently. So anyway, now I'm going on the direction of family, and as soon as I heard, you shouldn't have kids, don't open a clinic, I ran to him and said, what do you think? This is what the doctors are saying. And he said, well, I think we should have babies. And actually his words were, I'd rather have a little Audrey running around, and I know that we'll figure out later, and let's do that, and let's have kids. And I just thought, wow, this is why I loved him. He just kind of was so supportive at the time and didn't panic. And so, by the way, I didn't tell anyone else that I had MS, and I was diagnosed with it other than him.
Wow.
And my parents and my in-laws. And no, I didn't tell anyone else. My mother-in-law, nobody else in the in-law family. And I didn't tell any friends. Okay. And then when I was opening up my own practice, I had to tell my business partner. I felt that I owed it to her prior to going into business with her, because I didn't know what my world was going to be tomorrow.
Yeah.
I knew today, and I was going to work on today.
Wow, and how did that play into, because I thought the same thing you just said about your husband at the time, the way you wrote it, it seemed as if he was on board and actually very optimistic and supportive, and that's the way you wrote it, which it sounds like that's the truth. Was there any, that's a big part of this story too, was there any contemplation? Like, how did that, I guess diving into that mental conversation you had with yourself deeper, what was that like, knowing that these doctors are saying don't think about it, it was don't do it? How did that conversation actually go in your mind?
I think that when I heard the doctor say that, I know that in the first paragraphs of my book, Once Upon a Time, I think really so many people, and I know that throughout whoever you listen to, so many people say, you can't do this, you won't do that. Don't apply for physiotherapy, it's too hard to get into. You won't be able to manage that, you won't. And the more people have said to me, you won't, I kind of put on my armor and I say, I will. And I think that we need to know that things are going to trip us along the way, and other people's thoughts. Now, I know that this is the doctor, but I also feel like my sister was an amputee and continued to move on, and she was one of my models that I knew I can't go with other people's. Like, I knew how I felt, but I really did feel like I was going to survive. I don't know why, but I still today feel like I'm going to land on my feet and survive.
That's awesome. And a quote from your book that I took a picture of and sent it to a couple other people that I share all this stuff with before I release it online. And it was on page 28, my inner strength was not conscious, which for the first part of that is awesome, I think, because I can agree with it. Is people ask me, say, so how did you train for those 2 years when you didn't think you were ever going to play again? That's a good way. That's how I'll actually probably sum it up now. That strength I had, it wasn't a thing I was mentally thinking of, and then you go on to say it was fueled by an inner peace and secure, knowing that I was going to do my best, and I truly believe that I would be fine. And that's totally trying to relate as much as I can, not to specifically your adversities versus mine, but that was it. It's that I felt safe and secure chasing that, knowing I was going to try my best to get there.
Right.
And there was a piece that came with that, right? And I think that's so valuable in any journey, is that inner strength that you can't necessarily screenshot in your mind and put it into words. It's just there somehow.
Right.
Which I think is amazing.
Right.
So I guess now you're at the point where you decide to have kids, and you have kids successfully, regardless of what the doctor said. And so if we move on to that point now in your life of where you are, is you have children now, and you're still in the relationship with your husband, and the relationship with the woman in your life at this point had settled down a bit at this point?
Not
or was
settled down, it was absent.
Okay.
Absent, completely absent. So for years, it was absent, and I only concentrated on him. And actually, I built my life again with new friends and new experiences. So it was absent, and I had a practice with, at the time, probably 10, maybe 12 employees, and my husband and family and children. And so I was a busy lady, and didn't really also have time to have those feelings. I really did concentrate. Now, I did miss her. I did think about her probably almost every day, but in a different way. I just kind of missed her, but I wasn't going crazy. I just thought, oh boy, I guess I needed to do what I was doing, and I knew I was in the right place.
Okay.
So I stayed there.
And you still, at this point, loved your husband, and life was good, and your health was good at this point as well?
And my health was great. And I was playing squash, and I was as physically fitter than ever. And now I'm, 43 years old? So years have gone by, and feeling fabulous.
And then so moving on to when, I guess, decisions start to be made, or when she comes back into your life, I guess you can take me through.
Yeah, so all of a sudden now classmates have said, it's time to have a U of T reunion. She was in my class. Oh no, and so now again I'm having these awkward yet fabulous feelings, going back and forth and thinking, I really want to see her. I really don't want to see her. I really want to see her. I don't. I do. And so we now, the committee of 4 people, look at the class list of 100, and 100 class list, 60 and 40 occupational therapists. And so we looked at that list, and I said I would take her. I would call her, because I had my list of 10 people, let's say, 20 people. And I knew that I had to call her, and oh my gosh. Right now I have butterflies in my tummy knowing that feeling. And it was a great feeling and a nervous feeling. And I did call her, and she agreed to come to the reunion, and we agreed not to bring our spouses. Some people did, some people didn't. And really the reunion was all going to be about rehashing the old days. So I really didn't want to get into the current days. I wanted to rehash the old days. So anyway, not only did I enjoy seeing her, I enjoyed seeing everyone. And then we were saying goodbye, and I really did feel like she and I hadn't talked. The reunion was great. We chit-chatted about that situation and that story, and I didn't talk about her, and I didn't talk about me, and I didn't talk about us. And no one knew about us. And so at the end of the reunion, I invited her into my car, and we chatted, and I missed her. And I wanted her back in my life. And so I asked her to come back in my life, and she then told me how she was so upset the last time, and that really she didn't want this again because she had been so hurt the first time. And I said I understood, and oh my gosh, I promised I'd never do that again. Broken promise. And life just takes you in a journey where you need to go. So I said, okay, let's get back together, and we did. We got back together, and we saw each other frequently, and I still had a happy relationship with my husband and my children, and I had a happy relationship with her, and we were intimate once again. And so now I started to lead the real double life.
And how long did that go on for?
Well, in total, another 15 years.
Wow.
So really, from when I look and analyze it, it was I would be with her and sometimes with her and our children. She now had 2 children. I had 3. We'd go to the cottage together. We'd have a great time with the kids. And then I would go home with my husband and our kids. And then I would see her sometimes, just the 2 of us at a coffee shop. And then I would go back to him and back and forth and back and forth, day after day, month after month, year after year, for years.
And then getting to the point where, because I know there's a lot in between, to the point where you finally decided that you were going to do what needed to be done.
Now we're going and we're having a great life. And we both decide, let's just do this forever. Okay, so I loved her husband. I loved him, and when we got together, even if with the 2 of us and our husbands, we had a great time. I have my husband and a lover. I mean, really looking back, it was crazy, and I have a smile on my face now because I'm looking at your gorgeous eyes, and I'm smiling, but a lot of times I felt just really awkward and weird, and I said, this is just really weird, but it felt so good again that it was okay. I felt sad for my husband. I felt sad for the secret, but I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't do something. I couldn't divorce him. And I didn't want to divorce him because I loved him. And I didn't want to say goodbye to her because it really felt more right with her than with him. And now I understood about homosexuality. Now I understood about being lesbian. But I still didn't want to give up my family life. And so we decided we would just stay together and with our husbands. And so we made it work. And I still love my husband and did all that for him and us and our family. And she did the same for hers. And we tried really hard, but then we really had this relationship. Now she was building a new house, and I was great with that. I thought that was great. And I was going to help her move into that new house. And now I'll backtrack a bit. For a few years, I was having a really bad bellyache. I didn't understand it. So I had a full-time job, 25 employees, 3 fabulous kids, wonderful array of friends, but I had this terrible bellyache. And what I did was I would try to have Metamucil and prune juice and proper diet, and I was still feeling well except for my gut. Now I went for all the tests. You're lactose intolerant. Oh, you have irritable bowel syndrome, and I had every other diagnosis. We didn't understand it. I went for test and test and test and test. Terrible bellyache, until one day I said to my kids, I'm going to go to the hospital, which was around the corner, and I'm going to get some meds because my belly is really aching. And they said, okay, Mom, see you for dinner. Okay, I'll be back. Went to the hospital. I went to the waiting room. I felt really bad. I kind of stood up a few times and said, when am I? Oh, you're not next because you're not an emergency. I sat back down. I stood back up. I paced. All of a sudden, I just vomited blood all over the floor of the ER. And so they said, I think she's next. And I was just riling with pain, sat back down, riling with pain. And they immediately called my husband, who fortunately came within, minutes. And I just couldn't stand up. They wheeled me into x-ray. My blood pressure dropped. I was freezing. I didn't know what to do. I just couldn't stand the pain. And they decided to have me sign for surgery. And they were going to just go into my belly and see what was going on. And so they did, and they said, as I was still awake, we're going to do surgery. we might have to take out some of your bowel, and they said you might end up, having a bag in the side, and so I'm just, And so I went to sleep, had my surgery, and I woke up. I had not had a colostomy as I felt my sides. I took a big breath. I was alive. I woke up. Wheeled back into my room. They said I had, it's called a cecal volvulus, which is a bowel obstruction, and it had gone gangrenous. I had 3/4 of my bowel removed, and nasogastric tube in my nose. I kind of like tubes in every orifice. My nose, urinary catheter, tube in my belly. And I was lying in the hospital bed and took a big breath, and I woke up and I was alive. A day went by, 2 days went by, friends came around, and flowers all over, and someone said, "Does she know? Has anybody told her?" Actually, it was the first day, "Has anybody told her?" And I said no. So another friend of mine called my girlfriend, knowing she was an important person in my life, and she came by, and I just cried. And I thought, as I looked around at friends and family, I looked at the flowers around the room. Did I really want this life? I was living a lie. And I had a huge lump in my throat, and I was living a lie. And I didn't want to live a lie. I didn't want to live in sin. And I felt like I was sinning more because I was lying, not because I had this girlfriend. I wasn't sinning because of her. I was sinning because I was lying. And I didn't want that.
Wow, that's an interesting, that alone, I mean, we'll carry on here too, but it's an interesting approach when you are part of a church and you do have your beliefs, and because of what religion says, that you believe it's a sin to have a relationship with this woman. But then putting the pecking order in that it was more of a sin to be living this lie and lying to so many people, which growing up Catholic, it's an interesting approach that lie can take precedent over the other sin that may be going on.
Right. And of course, well, yes. I mean, I'm going to put this in because I think it's an important part right now. And looking at the Bible today, it's not a sin. There's nothing in the Bible that says anything about homosexuality. It's all about a man should not sleep with a man. Do you know why? Because if a man sleeps with a man, you can't make a baby. And back in the day when the Bible was written, it was all about procreation. And a man should sleep with a woman to make a baby. So there's nothing in the Bible. So that's another whole
We could spend a whole podcast, exactly.
I'm not going to do it, but I felt like I had to throw it in. Because
I appreciate
right now,
that.
Oh my gosh, it's just not a sin. And I want the whole world to know it is not a sin because it's not in the Bible. And reread your Bible correctly. All right, let's move on.
You know what? Again, this is all about bringing to light conversations people don't want to have and things people don't want to say or discuss. And it's about discussing both sides of the coin in every conversation, right? And I appreciate that you added that in, and I think it's important. So, so you're now coming to a realization that it's time, or that this lie has been taken too far. Yeah, and to be authentic.
I have to be authentic, and then I'm going to be a good person of integrity. That's the good person we want. That's the person who's, got the integrity and the morals and the ethics. That's the good person. Be authentic. And so I said, I'm going to be authentic. And so I took some really neat courses. One was called Landmark Forum, and if anyone knows about it, some people will say it's the best kind of course. It's a self-development course, and some will say it's a cult. It's not a cult if you do it healthily. And so I took that, and actually I decided at that time during the course to come out to my husband and tell him that I was in love with someone. He kind of said, "What's his name?" And I said her name, and he was shocked. And so we hugged, and I had to tell him that this was important to me, and I had to move forward. And he said, "That's okay. Let's just do what we've always done." He was, what a good man. He said, "That's okay. You've done it for years. Let's stay married. I want to grow old with you." that just alone brought tears to my eyes. Mm-hmm. So we hugged and we decided we were just going to keep this undercover like we always had and move forward. Just, kind of the same life we knew, the same life I knew. I'd love her, I'd love him. We'd bring up our children and we'd kind of move forward that way. And, some people do that today. Mm-hmm. And it's okay if everybody knows and nobody's lying. Mm-hmm. And it made sense at that time because he was on my side. How cute is that to be on my side again? And so I knew he had my back. And I couldn't have thanked him more and loved him more for it. And so for probably a few months, we had a great relationship because it was, I felt a little more cleansed, mm-hmm. which was great. And so then I decided, this was good. But my kids still didn't know, and my friends still didn't know. And so I was still kind of
living
lying
a
lie. And I said to him, it's really neat that you stood behind me, and I was really grateful for that, but I still felt awkward. And so when people would say, what'd you do on the weekend? I'd say I was with her. Oh, you're spending too much time with her. Well, oh man, then I'm like boggled with my words again, and I didn't have proper words. And usually I feel like can speak well, and yet I would be lost for words. Mm-hmm. And so I said to him, no, I think I have to tell people. We can still live like this. Let's just tell people. He said, well, that doesn't make sense. And then I'd feel awkward. Well, yeah, that made sense.
Yeah.
So then we decided to tell people. Actually, we didn't decide. I did. And so now he was not happy with me. Mm-hmm. So I said I needed to tell my sisters. So I flew to New York and told my two sisters. And just as a cuteness here, I told my sisters, and my eldest sister said, well, okay, we didn't know, but now that you tell us, it kind of makes sense because we knew she was in your life. And you know what? The more I look back, the more I see, yes. Oh, yes, okay, right, I get it. And they said, that's fine. And they were fine with all of that. Ellen had come out, and Will and Grace was on TV, and being gay was not so terrible. And as a matter of fact, it was kind of cool. It was becoming a little more in and a little more accepted and a little more appreciated and understood. So I did say to my husband, I needed to tell people. And then he was not happy, but and not only he was not happy, he was distraught and really upset, and I knew that. And I had to move forward for my own health and for he didn't deserve me anymore. He deserved a woman who loved him or a family that loved him and was not lying. It wasn't good that I was sitting there lying, and it wasn't good that he was lying, and I didn't want him to get sick.
Right.
So...
And when you say sick, you're talking now health as well, physically from living through this lie.
Right. So if you look at things, and in my book I mention this, I say, the first time I got MS, and then I went on the path of honesty, and my health improved, and then I brought her into my life again. And then I got sick again, and now I'm getting my colon removed. How many times do you have to get whacked across the head to see that you need to be authentic and live a life that is real? And how many times did I have to see that? So, they say when one door closes, another door opens, but you have to see if one door is smashing in your face, you have to make sure you open it again gently and move through it properly.
Right.
Right?
Right, that's very true.
Yeah, so there I was now, wanting to be authentic, and going through the next few years was really difficult. Difficult for me, difficult for my girlfriend, difficult for my husband, and now my kids knew, and I really did move forward with their participation, their decision-making, and had everybody on board and doing it lovingly. And I knew that I had to do this lovingly if I wanted to do it right.
So there was you had spoken about 3 years of I don't even know what you want to call that period of figuring things out and changing.
Challenging time.
Which is, going off that point too, in relation to other things in life, like I relate this to a topic I've talked about many times. It was, for me, it was moving away from playing the game of hockey. But in your situation, we can relate this to anyone's challenges, that we want that quick fix in things, and knowing, and this sounds very cliche, but the light at the end of the tunnel type concept is that what comes to mind as you're speaking is, you just said 3 years of challenge and figuring things out, and having everyone in the situation in your family figure things out as well, is that there are often periods of time that may not be as fun, whether that's a week, a month, a year, 2 years of figuring. That's change. That's, wings don't change overnight. I mean, sometimes in a perfect world they do, but that's all part of a journey, right? And it's hard to accept that.
Yes, and I think, to your point, change, as we know, is every second. So every second there's change. And if you can, I say, parade through changes, parade through the challenges, we're all challenged. There are changes, good and not so good. And so if you can make it as good as possible, and look at, as we say, about being grateful. Be grateful for the things you have, and try and make the changes that are occurring as good as possible. So whether it's bringing people to help you with the change, to viewing the change differently, to positioning the change, to bring in easier things to make the changes. And really it's a puzzle of looking at all of the things and looking at the best parts and pulling them along the path, pulling the best parts along the path, and allowing the things that aren't working so well not take place. Mm-hmm. And so now that's why I talk about empathy and trying to understand the other person's point of view and allowing them to participate in this difficult time. Mm-hmm. Everybody's point of view and other people's words, other people's opinions, other people's participation.
Right.
And then you change together, and then it's not just my change, it's our change.
And so then, going off of that, on everything you just said, if we bring everything to where you are today, and where you look extremely healthy and happy, and so where are you today with everything in total? I mean, this incredible journey is just, I can't believe we've shared it all on this podcast. It's so humbling to have the opportunity to hear it. So where are we today? Let's get to...
Right.
Yeah.
So I've written my book, and it was very therapeutic. Mm-hmm. And I was able to go step by step with my book and see, what could I have learned through the last 60 years of my life? Now I'm 61, and looking at what did I learn? And I think when I wrote my book, every page I wrote, I wanted to reflect. And often I actually summarized it. And I think that as I reflect on each part of my day, I learn and try, with the words of others, the assistance of others, to bring in something that's going to make me feel good. And so I've brought in all kinds of things like Abraham Hicks, who is a journey unto itself. If you want to Google Abraham Hicks, it helps me to balance my emotions. All of the spiritual teachers in my life, and I have many, through the internet, through books, through podcasts. And I think today is the day where, if we tap back into our spirit, our own spirit, and look at what the success of other spirits have done, whether it's Jesus or Muhammad, or looking at the Torah, whatever book you want to look at, the people in your life, your parents, your heroes, try and work through them. And I listen to the words and the feelings of others and try to move forward. And now I have a fabulous partner who helps to keep me strong, 3 fabulous kids, a great former husband who really allowed me to continue my journey of strength, parading through challenges, mm-hmm. making gay positive, feelings of good health. So as a physiotherapist, and health and sport and happiness and smiles and love is love.
And going off of the love is love, there was a part in, as we wind down here, a part in your book where it does have to do with your church friends, and it was that they still love you for you, but they don't necessarily agree with your relationship, was a piece I saw in the book. And I wondered, that whole overarching in an umbrella is just that, going back to how we started, that love is love, and all the relationships you talked about, whether they were, again, an intimate or a one-on-one relationship, it was just that there was love in all your relationships. How is that relationship for you with your church friends, or are you still as involved in the church? I wonder, only because it's a conversation that I feel like comes up all the time. Is this acceptance, or why do we believe something? And the other guests we've had on the podcast, whether it's talking with a Muslim Canadian, Wally Shah, we had an incredible conversation, is that, do we even understand why we include or decide not to include a certain minority? And I wonder your opinion on the church and the relationships you have with people from a certain faith, and what they agree with or disagree with, and if they're confused.
Well, if they're confused, I get it. Mm-hmm. And I am Armenian Apostolic. My husband is Armenian Apostolic, as my children and parents. My new partner, Carol, is Jewish. And my Armenian friends, 90% of them, I'm not friends with them anymore like I used to be. Also, as we go through life, remember, I've been with my new partner, Carol, for over 15 years. That's a long time. So you develop new friends anyway. Mm-hmm. I belong to a new church now, which is called the Metropolitan Community Church of Toronto. It's downtown Toronto, and it is called the Church of All People. It is Christian-based, but everybody is invited. And so whatever religion you are, whatever color you are, race you are, whoever you are not only included but enveloped. Mm-hmm. And it is a wonderful, wonderful church. Do I go often? No, because my own spirituality is the spirituality of all people, and that's what's held tight in my heart. And so I don't need to go to a place to be spiritual. I can be spiritual like right this minute, looking in your eyes. And so the Armenian church, I go from time to time. The MCCT, I go from time to time. We even go to synagogue from time to time. And so with religion, I don't like any of the didactic books, because I do think those were written thousands of years ago. Mm-hmm. The map has changed. Mm-hmm. And I think that, were there some fabulous thoughts and ideas in them? Absolutely. Morals and ethics? Absolutely. But I think all the books are good. Mm. And I think we should take all the books, good morals and ethics, and be a good person.
Right. Really, I find when you say that, it's like anything else in life that's changed, right? How many things have evolved?
Everything.
Look at sports, look at business models, everything's adapted and changed to where we are in time today. So, I don't know, you look at the Macklemore song, right, where we rely on a book written however many 3,500 years ago, or whatever his line is. It's interesting. And I'm not saying yes or no, agreeing or disagreeing with anything. I'm just talking openly about it like you and I are. I'm not saying anything's right or wrong. I'm saying things have developed, and sometimes you have to develop with things and make change. So, which you've done literally your entire life, from day one, moving around places and dealing with illness in the family, and I think everything you've done is incredible. And is there anything else, or ideas or concepts, you would like to add in as we conclude here in the episode?
I would like to say thank you for having me here. This is my first podcast.
Cool.
And so that's really great. My book is called Straight to Gay, Coming Out Saved My Life, Creating Joy and Health, and I honestly believe it. And I think that it is about parading through challenges in your life. Take on the challenges and do the best you can with them, and with a smile on your face, love in your heart, and bring in all the people that will, back you and grow with you, and grow to be the best person you can be, because then you will have joy, move towards joy, and you will be healthy.
I love that. In conclusion from your book, on page 115, if you take control of your thoughts, emotions, and actions, you take control of your health and your life's path.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of another Heroic Minds podcast. As always, if you're enjoying these episodes, feel free to leave a positive review on whatever platform it is you're listening on. And I'm always encouraging feedback, constructive criticisms, and any comments you may have to do with the Heroic Minds podcast. I'm Ben Finelli. We'll talk again soon.